Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching
that this somehow means that the Brexit vote wasn't legitimate. I wonder where you can pinpoint that inference in what I said. I wonder if you can point to a word where I inferred that.
I didn't say you necessarily, Maajid, did I?
Right, Tom, you see? That was very clever of you, and I'm glad I pointed out, because now you and I both agree that I wasn't inferring that.
No, I did say that, correct.
Yeah.
But, I mean, listen, you know as well as I do that people will be on the drums, banging the drums, saying, oh, it's illegal, because this is what the Russians want. It's like, at the end of the day, that even if the Russians do want this, it doesn't invalidate it. With the EU,
no, of course not. And I made that very clear, and that's why I said it. The point is, Tom, does it make you feel any differently? Perhaps even to say... No. Okay. Fine. I mean,
because
I tell you what. Wait, before you respond, I'll tell you why. For me, it would. If I voted Remain and then I discovered, for example, because Soros isn't a head of state; he's a private financer, right? But if I discovered, for example, that I tell you what, like, if I discovered Obama while he was president, instead of just giving that speech he gave that angered so many people here, if he was actually funding the Remain campaign, you know, I'd be a bit concerned because I'd be wondering what a foreign head of state is doing interfering in a domestic political debate.
100%, but then again, you wonder what a non-governmental body like George Soros is doing. What's his agenda?
Well, because private individuals, I think, are different to states. Private individuals can't. Let me just tell you why I think it's different, Tom. Private individuals don't control armies and nuclear weapons and chemical weapons striking within our territory. You know, Litvinenko and then the Skripals, right?
What did Soros do on Black? What was it called?
Well, he betted on the pound, Tom. That's not the same thing as poisoning people on our streets, is it?
He destroyed people's businesses.
No, but Tom, are you seriously trying to convince me that betting on the pound on the stock market, even betting against the pound as he did, as unethical as it may well be in your view, is the same as poisoning people on our streets with nuclear, and chemical weapons?
We don't know they've done that, first of all.
We don't know who done that.
I'm not saying the Russians. No, there's no actual evidence the Russians did that.
Well, there is evidence, Tom. You may not be convinced of the evidence, but you can't deny that, because think about it from this perspective. You're Sherlock Holmes, and there's a crime scene, right? Now, you, as Sherlock Holmes, Tom, need to investigate the poisoning of Skripal. And I'm Watson. And I say to you, Tom, you know, it's elementary. Well, actually, you should be saying that to me, right? You should be saying it's elementary, dear Watson, right? And then you say, if all other possibilities have been excluded, what's left, no matter how implausible, is the only possibility. So unless you can tell me who else did it, you've got no answer.
Okay. Well, I haven't. Okay, right. How about the Chinese? You think they could knock out that poison? I can't remember.
So the Chinese just gave Putin the only medal of highest state medal that any foreign state has ever achieved has been given by the Chinese to Putin. You tell me the Chinese would want to be killing Russian citizens? Hold on, Tom. Hold on. Let me ask you a question. You tell me the Chinese would want to be killing Russian citizens in Britain?
It's window dressing. They might have done it as a favour to the Russians. Who knows?
So the Russians were involved then?
Window dressing. It's window dressing. No. Maybe involuntary it might have been involved. If you're saying someone did it as a favour for them, unwilling. You don't know. I don't know.
Okay. So that speculation, I will take that. Your speculation there is valid speculation. Do you see, though, the difference, Tom, between speculation and intelligence gathering? Why should I take your speculation over the word of our security services?
But they haven't come up with any actual... But they just said, this is this poison that's made by the Russians, but anyone can make it. It's a chemical. Anyone could make it. They couldn't prove which location it was made at, could they?
The analysis of our security services do, though, still, you've got to admit, just like you admitted that I wasn't making any inference about the legitimacy of the Brexit vote, surely you'll have to admit that the analysis of our security services carries a tad more weight than your speculation.
It does, but they still haven't proven it. They just said it's...
No, nor have you, Tom. So I'll go back to the Sherlock Holmes conversation.
But you said they
unless you bring me an alternative theory, I'm going to take the security services theory.
But I have given you alternative theory.
But we've also agreed that the security services theory is stronger than your speculation.
So but theirs is still theory, though, correct? And obviously it lends towards... Basically, these stories suddenly appear when there's a lot of problems, there's a smokescreen for everything else.
Tom, seriously, you've got to step back a bit and see the wood for the trees. You're missing the wood for the trees. You are in your desperation to convince people that Putin doesn't have nefarious intentions when it comes to the breakup of the European Union and also the breakup of the United Kingdom, mind you. You're making excuse after excuse, and the level of, I tell you, the level of evidence you're demanding to prove that Russia was behind the Skripal attack, you wouldn't demand if your son ran home and said, or daughter, I don't know if you have a child, and said that somebody picked on them in school. You'd go immediately to the school and start demanding why your son or child or daughter is being bullied. In everyday life, you don't use a threshold of evidence as severe as you're demanding with the Skripal inquiry. And somehow we're expected to believe your speculation over the detailed analysis of our security services. That could risk war, by the way. They're not children. When they say stuff like this, they're very well aware it has geopolitical implications. And yet your speculation is somehow more credible. But anyway, Tom, thanks for calling in. It's Tom there from Walton-on-Thames. Mirel has tweeted saying, allegations only, Maajid. Let's remember that. Let them be positively proven first. Let us all remember the 9 million spent on behalf of the Remain campaign. As a taxpayer, I object to paying to one view only in a democracy. Mirel, I don't agree with the fact that Cameron used taxpayers' money for the Remain campaign. I don't think that was an ethical thing to do. But what you cannot say is that these, what's been revealed in the Sunday Times are mere allegations that haven't been proven. It certainly has been proven because Aaron Banks has admitted to some of it. So the stuff he's admitted to, like handing over phone numbers from members of Trump's transition team to Russian officials, you know, he's admitted to it. And so the question is, does that disturb you in any way? I'm sure it disturbs Trump's transition team. Does it change your perspective on your vote? I mean, not that you were willingly, as a Brexit voter, in collusion with the Russians. I'm not suggesting that at all. Nor that, in fact, the vote is somehow illegitimate now. I'm not suggesting that either. But does it leave a bad taste in your mouth that foreign powers were attempting to manipulate your vote? Andrew from Gospel Oak, speak to us.
Hi, Margie. May I just say how much I enjoyed your weekday slot recently?
Oh, thanks, sir.
It was great stuff. Margie, no. I think this is about the third time Carol Cadwallader's had at trying to, in some way, smear or cast aspersions at the way that the Brexit vote might have been sort of being influenced. Yet at the same time, we've got an MP, Member of Parliament, Priti Patel, handing in a dossier to the Electoral Commission, clearly demonstrating collusion and overspending by the Remain campaign.
Yeah.
The Electoral Commission is refusing to investigate. I think that's much more a cause for concern because it shows clear political bias by the Electoral Commission, some of whose members have actually come out and said that they oppose Brexit.
Yeah, Andrew, you know what? That wouldn't surprise me. Honestly, as a Remain voter, I'll tell you, it wouldn't surprise me if there's an institutional bias in this country for Remain in our civil servants and, for example, in the Electoral Commission, because, of course, that's not even a conspiracy. It's just that, you know, when Brexit was the rebellion and Remain was the status quo. Now, because Remain was the status quo, the institutions of our country, whether that be the civil service or any other form of bureaucracy, would naturally, I think, lean towards Remain because it was a status quo. And by definition of a rebellion, any insurgency is the outsider. So what you're alleging, I'm not even going to say is somehow far-fetched. I think probably there would be a Remain bias in our institutions. However, conceding that for you, Andrew, are you able to concede something for me? That allegations of overspending are very different to allegations of a hostile power that we're effectively at cold war. I don't want to use that word, overuse that word too much, but certainly cold hostilities with in the form of Russians. Is there a difference in your mind?
Absolutely. Two entirely different and separate issues.
Yep, and one of them being the interference of a hostile power, it potentially is more serious, isn't it?
Except that is, you've said the word potentially, Maajid.
Yeah.
There is nothing proved yet, whereas there is factual proof that Craig Oliver and Will Straw, members of two separate Remain campaigns, coordinated meetings, attended the same meetings, and therefore from Justum Generis, the same route, comes all their actions, and therefore joint spending. And so what's the Electoral Commission doing about that?
Yeah. Now, again, the 9 million Cameron spent, is it 9 million? Was it 9 million that Cameron spent of the Treasury money? Yeah? I don't agree with that. I think it was a bad move, and I think it aided the insurgency nature of the Brexit campaign. It only backfired on Cameron. But again, I'll say to you, Andrew, when I say potential involvement of a hostile power. What we do know is what Anne Banks has admitted. Of course, Isabel Oakeshott has this trove of emails, and no doubt when she publishes her book, much more is going to be revealed, because in her column she says today that she's only revealed what's been published in the Times is only a fraction of the actual amount of the contents of emails that she has. Now, Andrew, would it worry you that if you and I collaborated on Brexit and your entire team of people behind you, and I had all their phone numbers, and without your permission I handed them over to a foreign power, all the phone numbers of you and your team, would that not concern you? Is that not a serious thing to do?
It's a serious thing to do, but let's see what the result of that was. To date, there's nothing proved that anything was achieved from that. We certainly know that money was overspent by the Remain.
No, but Andrew, I'm quite sure that handing over. I think Aaron Banks is probably lucky he's not an American citizen, because I'm quite sure if you were an American citizen, I'm not convinced that. I mean, surely if someone would know, if you know the answer, text in 84850. I think that could be considered a federal offence, handing over data like that to to a foreign power in that way, which is why Trump's being investigated. I'm not saying Trump's guilty, by the way, but I'm saying that Aaron Banks has admitted it.
When the facts change, I change my opinions, but right now I can't say that there's anything's been achieved by whatever numbers might have been given. But really, Marge, if Aaron Banks facilitated the contact between Russia and the Trump transition team, what's that got to do with Brexit?
Well, considering he was the financer for the Leave.eu campaign, quite a lot, because in the old days, Andrew, again, I'm sure you'd agree with me, in the old days, in the Reagan-Thatcher days, now, I don't know what your views are on Thatcher, but I think that there are two leaders that, whether we agree with them or not, were undeniably leaders in this country, for good or for worse, for better or for worse. One of them was Thatcher, the other was Blair. They both won 3 terms, 2 in a landslide, and they both pretty much were, statespeople, unlike some of the leaders we've seen of late. So in the Thatcher years, Andrew, one thing again that's undeniable, I believe, is that handing over data to a hostile foreign power would be considered treason.
Yes. Where are we going with this? Because Aaron Banks has acted just as when you walk in through the door of your family home, you're a father and husband. Aaron Banks was leader of a vote, funder of a Vote Leave campaign, but he was also a businessman. He also has various other arms in the
party. No, his business ties with Russia, I'm not now saying could be considered treason under Thatcher. I'm suggesting that handing over data to a hostile power under Thatcher by people that supported Thatcher would be called treason by Thatcherites under Thatcher during the Cold War.
Okay, but...
Would you agree with that hypothesis? And I wasn't a Thatcherite, by the way, and I've never voted Conservative in my life, but I'm saying that by the standards of those who support... by the standards of those who would support Thatcher living under Thatcher, I think Thatcher herself would have probably called that treason. The Iron Lady was, mind you, dubbed the Iron Lady because of her stance against Russia.
But to take us back to where we came in on this...
Well, before we do, just comment on that, Andrew.
I'd say it could be treasonable, yeah.
All right. Thank you for your honesty. Do bring the conversation to the next point you wanted to make.
To take it back to Brexit, please, Carol Cadwallader, etc., still want to prove that Leave stole the election by hook or by crook, by any means possible. They will try to bend the facts to suit their aim.
Yeah.
Right now, no glove has been laid on the funding or any other legitimacy of the Leave vote. This is just the Monday morning quarterback trying to say, well, if I was in charge, or things should have been different, things should have been run differently.
Yeah. Andrew, if you want me to,
still hasn't managed to lay a glove.
Yeah.
Nobody's managed to lay a glove on the Leave vote. Funding, its legitimacy, or anything else.
Yep.
And so when we go back to what Aaron Banks was doing, so what? Really? If that's all they've got,
yep.
Move on, nothing to see here.
All right, Andrew, I'm going to concede that the vote is still legitimate. I'm not suggesting in any way that it isn't. So thank you, Andrew. And I want to genuinely thank you for your honesty, because that was a genuine conversation with somebody with whom I clearly have a different perspective, and yet we were able not only to remain civil, but concede points to each other when the facts appeared self-evident. So I want to really hats off to you, Andrew, for your honesty there. Brian wants to speak to us from Crawley.
Hi, Maajid. I agree with anybody handing over information to a foreign state is treason. And this is what I'd like to say, that there's a guy called Christopher Steele, who's a British agent. He's the one that wrote the Russia dossier against Trump. Now, Christopher Steele is on the run. He's didn't turn up at Horseferry Magistrates Court, and Theresa May needs to hand him over to Donald Trump for these charges. He's got a sealed indictment against him, and yeah.
But you just said he's on the run, Brian. So how can she hand him over if he's on the run?
Well, he's.
There was this. Hold on, Brian. There was this newspaper article today that was published about some guy, and it said, "Have you seen him?" This guy, have you seen him in Nice, Prague and Thailand? Shane O'Brien fled by private jet, evading Interpol. How he paid is puzzling police. Now, this is a story that's published today with the face of this Shane O'Brien, and he's the son of a postman who lived in a council estate. And the story is about how he managed to evade our police and escape Britain. Now, if this chap, Shane O'Brien, you're probably wondering where I'm going with this. If this chap, Shane O'Brien, who's the son of a postman, was able to escape England, invade our police, and now there's an Interpol notice on him, and he's from a council estate, and he's accused of basically stabbing someone, in other words, a low-level criminal, how on earth do you think Theresa May is going to find a former MI6 agent who's on the run?
He's not a former MI6 agent, he's a current...
oh, no, he retired a while back, Brian.
No, Christopher Steele?
Yeah.
Christopher Steele retired.
Right, that's what... Oh, sorry, did he... No, did he... sorry, am I... He left the post in Russia, but are you saying he's still in active service?
No, sorry, what did you say there?
I said he retired. I was under the impression he's retired. But are you saying he's still in active service?
As far as I'm concerned, he is.
OK, we're going to check that for you. I'm more than happy to... Yep, he's... Well, no, we just checked it. He's an ex-agent. He's ex-MI6. He's no longer MI6.
OK, so in that case, then why is he not facing charges in America for writing this... Russian...
You just said he was.
He's not in America... Sorry, in America facing these charges.
You just said he was facing charges in America, which is why you said Theresa May should hand him over, and I suggested she can't because she doesn't know where he is.
In America, but he is not in America. He is on the run somewhere. So
that's not making much sense to me, Brian. You're saying he's not charged in America, but he's not in America. Look, you just said he's charged in America, and Theresa May should hand him over. And I said if we can't even find Shane O'Brien, who stabbed someone, who's raised on a council estate, son of a postman, how are we going to find an ex-MI6 agent who's on the run somewhere? I mean, you know, it's not that easy. But thanks, Brian, for calling in. You're listening to Maajid, Nawaz, and the time is 12:46.
This is LBC.
The Sunday Times has alleged hidden Kremlin links to Aaron Banks, the biggest donor to the Brexit campaign. Is this a political witch hunt or a legitimate investigation? Jay wants to speak to us from Birmingham. Go for it, Jay.
Hi, Maajid. I have to say, as much as there's criticism and controversy with some of the things you say, I really enjoy hearing you speak and some of the debates that you've been involved in as well. So I just wanted to get that out there first.
Cheers.
Hopefully I'm not too much of an intellectual wrestle. It's just I believe that when it's coming to Russia, I feel like the problem's a lot bigger than what's been portrayed in some of the media. So at the minute, I mean, the last few days, actually the last good few months, I've been focusing on a lot of articles where it seems like England seems to be targeting Russia with a lot of matters, whether it's to do with the nerve agent, whether it's to do with the Russian spies, or I read something the other day about the MH17 aeroplane saying that they've got evidence that Russia had shot it down. Yet a lot of this evidence doesn't seem available to the public. I know this has been mentioned through some of the past callers as well. So it had me thinking last night about Ukraine and when Russia invaded Ukraine. I remember seeing David Cameron come on TV and say, oh, you know what, the Russians can't bully their neighbours. And it crossed my mind, why is there such a focus at England, even David Cameron himself when he was in position, to actually come forward and challenge these things when there's other areas, like such as societal areas, which in my opinion would be a greater focus. There seems to be a lot of somewhat political gameplay, especially you mentioned the geopolitics behind what's going on with this matter.
Well, I think it's difficult, Jay, to separate the fact that unless, of course, you dispute this, but I think it's quite clear that that Putin is certainly seeking soft power influence across Europe. And when I mean soft power, I mean influencing political parties that are on the rise that would be more aligned to his interests than they would be elsewhere. And as a result, of course, one of the consequences of Putin seeking that influence is that news articles appear about him seeking that influence. I wouldn't necessarily say that's scaremongering. It's just people reporting what Putin's doing. And lastly, and I'll let you come back on this, I think it is important for us to recognise that not all evidence of the security services, when they say, for example, that Putin is behind the Skripal attack, not all evidence will be published because, of course, the nature of intelligence gathering is precisely that. You cannot reveal your sources nor how you spy on hostile powers, for example.
Definitely, and it's not, I think in regards to the evidence, it's not a matter of revealing who the source is particularly, but the content of that would really benefit the UK to know about, firstly. And in regards to Putin, without a doubt, I definitely believe that he's got an agenda. I mean, that's clear. If you look at throughout kind of history and the way that he's made certain ties or invaded certain places or certain moves that he's made, I mean, it is clear that it is an agenda. However, there's also agendas from pretty much every country, including our own, which aren't necessarily publicised, even with, not to deter too much, but with the, with the Windrush generation, I'm not getting onto that too much, but the way that it's hyped up for, a couple of weeks, I couldn't tell you the last time I've heard anything in the media about the Windrush generation. It seems to be minimised after that. Whereas Russia, there's a massive focus on it, consistently scrutinising and constantly kind of ploughing into that.
You know, I often take the view, Jay, and we discussed this on, I've got this other show on The Pledge on Sky News, and we discussed this idea of even you know, this story that was of the Steele and the murder of the Liberal leader's allegedly gay lover and the alleged murder behind that. I don't know if you caught any of that in the news, but the idea that was there a conspiracy cover-up, of course, back in those days, in the 70s, there was, and the conversation was around whether there are still establishment cover-ups to things. And I think the Windrush story is an example of one instance of a scandal that then gets exposed. Of course, then it gets stopped, and that's why it's not an ongoing story, because the scandal got exposed and then the government reversed its policy. If the government continued despite that story, you'd see more stories coming out. That's the only difference between that and Putin, is that he continues to do what we're alleging he's doing.
I would understand, but the Windrush generation matter, that isn't something, they did change policy and they did obviously get someone else in position and everything else, but that was a matter that I wouldn't say it stopped. It's certainly not stopped. I mean, I've worked with the local authority and I was working with those families in 2015. This was before when Cameron was in Parliament. I don't put Theresa May's feet.
No, but they're not being deported in that way anymore, are they? Because the government's stopped that.
Yes, they were.
No, but they're not anymore.
Families directly that were.
That's why you're not seeing it still as a story, because the government stopped doing it, whereas Putin hasn't stopped seeking to influence our votes.
Of course, but in terms of deporting, by all means, there's statistics and whatnot to measure that. But beyond the deporting, I mean, when a family are in certain immigration matters, very easily, I mean, across the region, they're considered no recourse to public funds where they don't get access.
Yeah, and I can assure you that that immigration stories and the difficulties of asylum seekers do continue to be reported, not least by the Guardian. So it's not that that's not a story. It's that, you know, stories emerge when things happen. As somebody who works in media, I can assure you that there's, you know, for example, here on LBC, there's no desire to cover anything up. We've just had Nigel Farage on for 2 hours, and he's more than happy to speak about his perspective on this, because he did, not on his show, just before his show. I mean, I tried to ask him to stay behind to speak to me about it. But what I'm saying is, and here I am taking an opposite view to him. So there's no agenda here, apart from the fact that, you know, we are genuinely interested in events as they happen. Windrush happened, and it stopped happening, whereas Putin keeps happening.
Definitely, and I don't feel that it's, I mean, I'm not really one, I hope I'm not anyway, of a conspiracy theorist where it's coming up with massive conspiracies, but the bottom line, which we are aware of, is that there are politics and there are agendas behind politics.
Of course.
And it seems that when it comes to certain political moves that the UK may make, even the recent bombing or the consideration of bombing of Syria with the USA and England, when I consider it, even linking back to the Russian matter, I mean, Russia's got a small navy presence in, I think it's Tartus, which is on the Syrian Mediterranean coast. So it just seems like there's a lot of links. Again, not to blow up any sort of conspiracy, but it seems that this is more about gain rather than focusing on what matters we're currently addressing, such as the societal ones that we have to deal with, homelessness, young people, the funding cuts across the board, these sort of matters.
Do you think, Jay, that do you think those who believe in Remain, I'm not going to presume your vote, but those who believe in Remain, do you think they're not concerned about staying in the EU precisely because of our economic future? I mean, they are very much connected, those two.
Yeah, definitely. Right? And I mean, I was for Remain myself, and I do feel that without a doubt that there are those considerations about our economic future and whatnot, and that has to be. Regardless of how much a country struggles, we need to focus on our economics. That's why even with some matters around immigration, I'm very passionate about that. I want to support as much people as I can. But at the same time, I don't believe in just opening all the doors and whatever else. I believe that there needs to be a structure because we're an economic society.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Between Angela Merkel's open door policy and Poland's closed door policy, there's got to be a happy medium.
Exactly.
All right, Jay, I'm going to have to move on, I'm afraid, because I've got to get one more caller in before we end up on getting to the news. But thank you so much for having that conversation with me. There's Jay there from Birmingham. And John wants to speak to us from Spain. Go for it, John.
Hi. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
Just to say, I'm always surprised. I'm no apologist for Putin. But I'm surprised everybody seems to have forgotten how the Georgian situation started off and how the Ukrainian situation started off. Do you remember how the Georgian situation started off, the South Ossetia?
Pray tell. Go for it.
We were all watching the Beijing Games, and that madman, the Georgian president, who incidentally they want him extradited back to Georgia to face criminal charges, he shelled South Ossetia, a sort of slightly disputed state, and killed several hundred people, which was ridiculous. It gave the catalyst for Russia to come in, along with militia, and invade and look like the saviors of South Ossetia, and finish off going to Tbilisi, getting as far as Tbilisi, just outside Tbilisi, before they returned, and killed several thousand. So thousands of people were killed for this madman from Georgia, who incidentally fled Georgia, well, didn't flee Georgia, from Georgia he went to the Ukraine as an advisor, an absolute idiot. He should be there before war crimes. And regarding the Ukraine, we all seem to forget the situation being that they've had 30 years of democratically elected governments, Russian favouring, Western favouring, Western vice versa, going back each way. But it made no difference because the Ukrainian oligarchs, who have twice as much property in the UK than the Russian oligarchs have, they've run that country for decades and decades and decades to the detriment of the people. So what actually happened? The Russian guy who was in power at the time, he signed a deal with Russia instead of the UK, instead of EU rather than actually take the billions that were being offered by Ashton, I think her name was. They made her a dame. It was the EU department was led by Ashton, the English lady.
John, does that justify the invasion of the Crimea?
Well, to a certain extent it does. So what actually happened was this. Let me explain.
Yeah.
What happened is this. We all know that Eastern Ukraine does not like Western Ukraine. And then the first diktat the new government made, which was first government overturned by force, the first diktat they made is they were going to ban the Russian language. Well, over 95% of Ukraine, their first language is Russian, and 90% of Eastern Ukraine.
So, John, when before Turkey allowed for a loosening on some of the restrictions on the Kurdish language, would you say that the banning of the Kurdish language in Turkey allows for anyone to invade Turkey?
No, not at all. But
so what you seem to be suggesting is because of a tyrannical... Hold on, John. What you seem to be suggesting is that because of an internal or a domestic policy you disagree with, clearly, if that's true, it sounds quite harsh, that the Ukrainians took, that justifies opening up their land to invasion by a hostile foreign power.
What you're forgetting, that Crimea has always been pre-Russian, and that 90-odd% of them are Russian, first language is Russian.
No, John...
What's that telling them? But let me just finish one point.
No, you're not going to finish that point, because I want to speak about this point, John. You've just justified the invasion of a country because of a domestic policy you disagree with. Perhaps for good reason. But how on earth could it be justified to invade a foreign country?
It was hardly an invasion, and you can have as many referendums you want in the Crimea.
It's hardly an invasion?
It wasn't. It's hardly an invasion. They annexed it. There wasn't actually a fight over it at all.
Oh, come on, John. You're playing semantics here. The point is, the Russians now occupy the Crimea illegally. Now, what do you have to say about that?
Wait, let me make one point.
No, you're going to make... No. Answer the question. The Russians now occupy the Crimea illegally. What is that right?
It's gone back to Russia, but the point was...
John, that's not the point. The point is the point I'm making, because you're a guest on my show. Answer this question. Is it right that the Russians have invaded and occupied the Crimea?
No, I don't think it's right at all.
Ooh,
but
wow.
For me, the catalyst...
Thank you.
The catalyst was the fact the catalyst was also that they installed this Georgian guy as the president of Sebastopol.
No, John, this whataboutery, this excuse-making, that's like me saying 9/11 was wrong, but come on, guys, we did kind of, upset the Arabs in the Middle East and the Muslims, so we did kind of have it come. You can't justify something that was wrong by then caveating it, John. At the end of the day, there may well be stuff you disagree that Ukraine did, but nothing justifies the invasion of their country and the occupation of their land.
I would agree with you on that basically nothing was going to happen.
Why is the first word you say after I agree with you a but again? Because of course, remember what we're talking about. We're talking about Putin's influence in Europe. Now, why is it not as simple as just to say, I agree, without the but? I, for example, John, will tell you right now, invading Iraq by our country was wrong. There's no but to it. There's no except the Iraqis had it coming because Saddam was a bad guy. It was wrong. True or not, John?
But that's true. But
you just said but again.
90% of Eastern Ukrainian people are anti-Kiev.
90% of Iraqis were anti-Saddam. Does that mean it was right for us to invade Iraq?
In some ways you could say yes, some ways you could say no.
There we are, John. There you are. You can justify invading anything then by that definition. Anyway, John from Spain, thank you very much. A police commander is suggesting that one way to stop urban violence is to threaten their families with eviction. In other words, collective punishment, punishing somebody for the sins of another. Evicting entire families for the crimes of one person. That's a bit draconian, isn't it? 03456060973. Matthew wants to speak to us from Leicester. Go for it, Matthew.
Hi, Maajid. Never phoned into yourself before, but generally always agree with you. On
Welcome.
this one, however, I take a slightly different stance.
All right.
So I actually agree with the proposed measures. The reason being, there is something in place very similar already, which is if you take, for example, a single mum, she might work the odd evening or so, but she's going to have some children at home that are old enough to look after themselves. They might be playing loud music, doing antisocial things. There are steps already in place to evict them if that continues. And generally what will happen is the mum will say, hang on a second, I've got multiple children or various other people living in the property. I need to do something about that. And they do. And when this happens, it's a very positive effect. One, because they don't lose their home. Two, the parents then really do start stepping it up and taking a bit more control. And three, for the other residents in the area, it becomes a much nicer place to live.
Matthew, there's a huge flaw in your logic.
Go on.
What happens within the confines of the four walls of her own home, such as loud music, is controllable by the mother. What her 15-year-old son does outside of the confines of her own home isn't as controllable by the mother. And to punish the mother, who's entirely innocent of the ongoings beyond the four walls of her own home, is surely punishing an innocent person for the crimes of another.
I agree to a certain extent. However, if that mother is then faced with either losing her home or doing something about her child, and we'll say son, because obviously there can be daughters, but generically it's going to be a son, then she has different options in front of her. Granted, it's less controllable, but she does have different options in front of her.
Such as?
And a lot of these gang people. Okay, so the first one would be if she's actively aware of what her son is doing, turn him in. She may not have wanted to have done that before. But
right, so what you'll see, Matthew, you see, this is why I said it's Orwellian, because what you've just said there, what you're basically endorsing without necessarily having thought it through, but you may have done, you tell me, but what you're endorsing is now the state imposing an obligation on a mother to grass up her son, become the policewoman, in this case, at risk, under threat of losing her home. And you don't see the problems that could emerge from that, including the fact that unelected bureaucrats will have that amount of control over a single vulnerable parent.
For a start, I wouldn't say the parent would be vulnerable because in these particular circumstances, the parent will have had some control leading up to this. She will have seen.
You don't think that a mother threatening to be evicted from social housing as a single mother is vulnerability?
No, not at all.
Matthew, this is where I'm just going to say, up until now we were having a reasonable conversation. Now you're being disingenuous.
No, the reason why I don't see it as being vulnerable is because she is only vulnerable if there aren't other options. Now, they can't just evict somebody and give no further options. So they might be able to say, we are going to evict you. However, your son is now going to be taken into control of
Matthew, we evicted Saddam Hussein from Iraq upon made-up or at least exaggerated evidence. You really think this state power cannot be abused once it's instituted against vulnerable single mothers that you refuse to accept are vulnerable?
I, of course, agree that it is open to abuse, and that, I think, needs addressing and needs looking into. But I do not accept that there is some level of vulnerability there, because...
No, you know, okay, look, you're going to have to, I'm sorry, before we move on from this point, you're going to have to concede that the state threatening to evict a single mother from her home because of the actions of a son and what he does outside of that home is vulnerability. Whether you think it's justifiable or not is separate to conceding that you are making the mother vulnerable there.
Right. Allow me now to put this into a different slant, okay? So if we take the gang aspect out of it, imagine that it was a suspected terror suspect.
Which, by the way, hasn't been done. It hasn't even been done for terror suspects. It's being done for gang members, which is part of the absurdity here.
I'm aware of that, but let's just do the slightly different slant. So imagine it was a terror suspect, okay? You would expect the family to essentially report them, wouldn't you?
No, I wouldn't. No. I tell you what I would expect is if the family had absolute concrete evidence and knowledge of an attack that is imminent, that I would expect them to voluntarily report that absolute and concrete knowledge. What I wouldn't expect them to do is be obliged to act as policemen under threat of eviction that the state imposes on them to say, if you don't report stuff, we'll kick you out of homes. Because I tell you what will happen there, Matthew. You'll have countless and countless of false allegations being made by vulnerable people because they fear they're being evicted from their homes, half of whom don't even speak proper English and can't understand what they're being told by the council. And I'm astonished that you can't see how this won't be open to abuse.
I've just said to you, I think that it could be open to abuse, and so it does need further looking into. But I'm looking at this as a parent myself. Now, if I found out that my little boy, when he gets older, was involved in some sort of gangs or anything like that, and he came home and something had happened, and I had suspected that he may have been involved, yes, of course, I would be talking to him.
Would you want that conversation with your son under threat of eviction?
Well, that wouldn't happen because I'm a homeowner, but...
Matthew, you know what? You've just summed it up perfectly there. Thank you for that. The callousness with which you approach this subject is now, I think, understandable. It wouldn't happen because I'm a homeowner. And when people say... When they talk about privilege, I often say to them, come on, let's have a conversation based upon the ideas. But I think this is one of those very few exceptions where it's impossible to ignore the facts around that conversation. That here we have Matthew, who's a homeowner, speaking callously about how women who are threatened to be evicted from their homes unless they grass up their sons for offences they're being alleged to have committed aren't vulnerable. Well, of course they're not vulnerable for somebody who owns their own home and therefore never has to countenance the idea of being evicted because of something your child does. Matthew, can you not see, I'm going to give you, to be fair to you, I'm going to give you a chance to come back here because I know that I have just basically, if I move on from here, it wouldn't be fair because you may have a response to this, but can you not see how your position in being completely unlikely to face this kind of state action renders you somewhat incapable of sympathising with a single mother in social housing?
No, not at all, because I started off in social housing. I started off in social housing.
Wow, hang on, Matthew, I just gave you a chance to redeem yourself and show some empathy here.
Maajid, okay, I started off in social housing.
And now you own your own house and you're unable to empathise with the vulnerability of a single mother.
I've just said the empathy would be only that she has got no control over her children. And
yet she should still be threatened to be evicted.
Well, but hang on, regardless of whether I'm a homeowner or not, okay, if I have no control over my child, I have certain things open to me.
All right, so should we open it up to deportation as well, Matthew?
Well, we're not talking about that.
No, I'm wondering where this stops.
Well, no, I think deportation is a little bit, you know, a bit beyond the cuff here.
Why? What if the civil servant doesn't?
because that's not what we're talking about.
Well, no, I'm talking about Matthew. Dare I say we're talking about what I say we're talking about because it's my show and I pick the topic. So answer the question. What's wrong with deportation? What if the civil servant decides that the eviction isn't sufficient because the son didn't stop his alleged criminal activities and the mother therefore didn't do the job the state imposed upon her to act as policewoman, and therefore he's going to next ratchet it up and threaten her with deportation?
Well, for a start, I wouldn't say the state are imposing her to become a police officer. What I would say is that they are asking her to do her civil duty, which is if you see a crime or you are aware of a crime,
that's false.
You have to report it.
False. The report here isn't that if she didn't report a crime, they would evict her. But what's being said here is if her son doesn't stop being a gang member, they would evict her. In other words, whether or not she has knowledge of a crime, the actions of her son are being used as leverage to threaten to evict her from her home, whether she knows about what those actions are or not.
Right, but she is not just going to get a letter out of the blue saying, your son is a bad person, off you go.
No, she's not.
She's going to have a lot of notice. She's going to be told an awful lot of things.
That's right, they tell us that.
If she refuses to do anything about it and turns a blind eye, in my eyes, unfortunately, that makes her complicit.
No, so hang on a minute. So you define whether she's turned a blind eye or not, yeah?
Well,
what if the mother's saying, I'm doing everything I can, and you, the unelected civil servant who owns his own home, says, I don't believe you, mother, out you go.
Okay, has she asked for assistance? Has she? There are many
Matthew, you know what? I gave you the chance to come back, but this is not getting anywhere. Chris from Brighton has said, I think evicting families from council homes linked to extreme gang criminality is a great idea. It's only because you don't live next door to such people that you virtue signal your opposition to it in such a hysterical fashion. These people completely lost all sympathy and humanity. Matthew, thank you for calling in and for giving us your view, brave as you were. I vehemently disagree with you and think, actually, that you showed a callous lack of empathy for the vulnerability of single mothers and the sheer power a state has over them. But we will continue this conversation. The time is 2:32.
Mervyn in Bow, you've been waiting for a few minutes and I appreciate your time. Go ahead and have your say, Mervyn. Oh.
It's a sanity and to speak to. Yeah, Grant Shapps, I thought he was quite positive, but I've got some doubt about his complete genuine opinion of what people voted for.
Right.
We received a £9 million leaflet through every door in the land.
I don't remember getting that.
Made it perfectly clear we believe in the customs union, the single market, we wouldn't in future be joining the euro, and we'd be leaving EU completely.
Yep.
As far as I'm concerned, that's what I voted for. I read the leaflet, I sent it back to number 10 as a waste of money, so I didn't put a stamp on it so they could pay for that as well. But I thought it was patently obvious. They only had to make the statement, this is what we're leaving, on television or radio, you know?
Yep.
I think you're right about the House of Lords. I think they've signed their own death warrant. Certainly, hopefully they have. And meaning any part or any form of customs union means we are still part of the EU. We will be subject to their rules, regulations, and cost. We cannot stay in the.
So we're a rule taker, but we have no say. That would be a disaster. Do you think that's more likely after the 2017 election that Theresa May won but lost?
I was very disappointed that I thought she'd get a strong mandate to carry on with that, in mind to leave completely. And the only thing I think is a little bit reassuring is the fact that apparently she's a very good, very faithful Christian. So if she believes in telling the truth, then if she says to us, we're leaving, it's Brexit, we're leaving this, we're leaving that, then I hope she keeps to her word.
Okay. Well, Mervyn, just list me the 2 or 3 things then you want, just so people can get their heads around it. What is Brexit for you? When it was yes or no on the ballot paper and subsequently, what is Brexit for you? I'm trying to get to the bottom of what people will not accept going forward.
Brexit, for me, means getting back control and making our own laws, not the European Court of Justice, I know that's a side issue, but also keeping out the common market, keeping out the customs union, which means we're tied to tariffs. There's tariffs with goods in, goods out, trading with the rest of the world, which would come without the EU membership, and basically getting out the control of what's becoming a monster superstate. And Italy and other countries are kicking off now. They all want out. Greece has got 50% youth unemployment. There's nothing good in it. It's a political gravy train.
Well, and just finally, what about Northern Ireland, or didn't you think about that?
I considered the Northern Ireland situation, but I think the digital method is much more preferable, you know, where they'll use high technology to govern what's necessary. They don't need a hard border, but they do need a technological backup, you know, a super system, so they can get things running right.
But you know, there isn't the technology right now, is there? It just doesn't exist, they said. I know it's a comparatively small amount of trade, actually. I'd like to know, does anybody know the answer to that question? How much actual trade goes across the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland? I'm actually not sure how much trade. You wouldn't think it was beyond the wit of man to be able to sort this out. And we always talk about it from our point of view, Mervyn. What about the EU when it comes to that? What concessions do they ever make?
Well, they don't make concessions, do they? I mean, everything put up, they shoot down that Barn, what's his name, the Barniers, the ghost.
Did you call him Raymond Van Barneveld? He's a dartist.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Michel Barnier.
That's the Dutch one.
Yeah.
The other guy, you remember the other one? He was a very outspoken guy, Verhoeven.
Oh, Guy Verhofstadt.
Yeah, he's an arch European. They all believe in the European dream, which was it's grown up out of the Clergy project years ago, if anybody's read about that. But, I mean, Blair and Oxfam got prizes from the Charlemagne Clergy. This is not a good thing.
All right, Mervyn, thank you very much indeed. Certainly appreciate your time.
Elizabeth has called from Clacton and Phil in Corby to talk about that photo, really, or that photo as a springboard for a conversation about whether it tells us something fundamental has changed about how the West does politics. Do you think it has, Elizabeth?
Yes, I'd like to congratulate President Trump for sticking up for his beliefs and what he told his people that he was going to do. And the liberal elite are on their way out, thank God. That's why the world is such a mess. They cave into everything.
What have they done wrong, the liberal elite?
Well, look how they get billions to Iran. They haven't got anywhere, really. Now Italy are turning back boats full of migrants. Where are these migrants coming from? Who supplied the boats? But getting back to President Trump, look, he's now in Singapore having a meeting with, another...
He will tomorrow, yeah, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. Well, who has done that? Nobody. Look what he's doing. And all the...
He isn't the first American president to be offered the opportunity. He's just the first American president to have accepted the opportunity.
Well, he's not a fool, and the names people call him in this country is disgraceful. And I hope when he comes here, we don't have any of these old lefties like Owen Jones and Sadiq Khan bad-mouthing President Trump, because I think that would be an absolute disgrace. And no wonder he's being put off Great Britain. USA are our greatest allies.
But are they behaving that way towards us, do you think?
Well, no, if we weren't in the EU, I'm sure that he would be behaving like that towards us. And the EU do not like it one bit. And when we leave, thank God, because we can do our own deals with the USA and the EU can't do anything about it, and they don't like it.
Interestingly, though, when he was asked about his relations with other leaders, he didn't mention Theresa May yesterday.
Well, no, because why should he? She's the wet lettuce. She doesn't stand to people either. She's caved into the EU over everything, and we're really annoyed here in Clacton the way she's betrayed our fishing folk.
And
all the time.
When I talk about the post-war, the kind of post-war settlement that was created in the world after all that horrible loss and destruction, and
I know my father was a prisoner of war in Germany.
Was he? Yeah. I mean, because you know better than most, then, Elizabeth, that that world order wasn't it, Western democracies with America fully behind and monetarily supporting those democracies after the war in many cases, and it feels to me like it's kind of worked. You say it absolutely hasn't worked.
No, I don't. I mean, I've travelled when I was younger. I travelled around Europe, going from East to West Germany. I've been to Berlin, to the wall. I've also been to South Africa when the apartheid was on, and that was disgusting. So I've travelled a bit and seen a bit of the world. But at least we stood up for our principles, and what one politician said they're going to do something, they did it. Not our lot that cave in. And
who have we caved into?
Well, we cave into all these political correct lefties and think, oh, you mustn't say this, you mustn't do that.
What are they stopping you from? How are they stopping you from living? I'm genuinely curious.
No, they're not stopping me from living.
No, but what are they stopping people from doing? Because I feel like I live in a very free democracy, and I'm happy to do so.
Well, this is good that we have LBC because you allow people like me, ordinary British housewife, to have our points of view, which is good. But if we go against the old lefties, like the vote coming up tomorrow in Parliament, you see some of these MPs coming on, oh, the world's going to come to an end because he voted to leave the EU. Well, why aren't we getting behind this country and not...
Well... let me give you an example. You keep referring to people as old lefties or lefties. Yeah. Kenneth Clarke couldn't on any planet be described as a lefty, the Conservative MP.
He's another...
Well, he's very pro-European, isn't he? So
it's about time he retired. I mean, you know...
Yeah, but he's not a lefty, is he? So you're lumping a lot of different views under that one banner.
Well, to me, it comes over as complete... As I say, a wet lettuce like Theresa May, she's hopeless as well. We voted to leave the EU, and when that other gentleman... We're leaving? Yeah, but not for another, 3 or 4 years?
Well, it's not clear yet, is it, what's going to happen? That's part of the problem, that it isn't clear. Elizabeth, thank you for your call. Elizabeth in Clacton-on-Sea. She's supportive of Trump smashing up the liberal norms, the lefty liberal norms, as she sees it. Terry's called from Cobham. Hello, Terry.
Good afternoon, Shelagh. Of course these people should be accommodated. That goes without saying. What I don't understand by these yellow-livered politicians is that them people will cost, if it's 500 people, will cost £100 million at the end of the day, from benefits, from work factors, from insurances, from things, from the accommodation, everything, and that's just the cost of it. But they should be accommodated, I'm saying that. If you go to 5,000 people, that's £1 billion. Why haven't the idiots who supposedly run us just thought about it in Syria, in Iraq, in Ethiopia, in Africa, the Horn of Africa, and Libya? Why haven't people said, let's pay the money there and build up their infrastructure? You said it quite rightly, they don't want to leave their homes, they don't want to leave their homes. But we listen to idiotic people telling us, this is the beginning of the summer. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And there has to be something done about it. But we have to pay. I don't mind paying. Helping towards the paying of it. And before you say about the terrorists, what about if they're fleeing terror and things like that? Then go and kill the terrorist like Trump did in Iraq and in Syria. And he said he'd do it in 6 months. He did it in 7 months.
But the thing is...
ruining your life, Shelagh.
Well, Terry... Terry.
Children have been ruined by what people have done, what Tony Blair done. And it's disgusting. We're all just standing here.
Oh,
of course they've got to help.
Terry, I don't think... I mean, I don't know your family, so but their lives haven't been ruined by Tony Blair, have they?
Of course they have, 100%. Because look how they're living. Look how they're living in this country now. What are you going to hire for? Don't you know? If you're in the real world, there's no housing. The children... I've got mistress of a school in Surrey, my daughter. The classes are full. There's 20 different languages.
But that's house building. That's house building, Terry.
That's Soviet. No, you have to build their houses. You don't build someone's house, take someone out of an house and build an house somewhere else for them in your back garden. We must help the people. But the people like you, sorry, Sheila, I think you're great. You keep saying, no, well, they have to come there.
No, I haven't. I've said, no, but Terry, I've said many times this hour that we have to manage it, not have everybody from anywhere come to the UK or any other country for that matter. Of course, we have to manage it.
I'm not talking about the UK. I'm talking about in general. These people have to live somewhere. If it was me or you'd be fleeing as well. So you turn the coin round like everything in life. Look at the other side. We pay for it. We have to pay to keep them there and build the infrastructure. It's really simple. Why are we not doing that? You would do that. I would do that.
Well, we are doing it, but just not doing it enough, it seems. Terry, thank you. Terry in Cobham.
George is in Blackburn. George, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome, George.
I'm one of these Brexit fundamentalists who your other callers are talking about.
So you want to leave even though we're definitely not ready?
Yeah. I mean,
okay. Why is that then?
Because the thing is, we'll never be ready. Negotiations with the EU. The EU never agreed to anything that we negotiate with. It's like
they haven't changed their position in 23 months.
No, when Cameron went over originally to negotiate, when he was in power and he went over and he did big press conference saying he's going to get this and he's going to get that and he's going to get to that. He came back with nothing to the electorate. No, he did in relation.
What did he say he was going to get?
Well, he said he was going to sort out things to do with migration and things to do with...
he didn't, though, did he? Because we were already subject to Article 2 of the Citizens' Charter. We could already...
I know, but he tried to negotiate things with them. And
with countries that are already in Schengen and the Euro. So David Cameron, and I think we can both agree the man's a clown. Some of us realised it at the time. Some of us, perhaps like you, didn't. You thought that he would be able to pull some sort of rabbit out of the hat. What happened when he went to those negotiations is the countries turned around and said to him, you're not in the Euro and you're not in Schengen. What is this mythical deal you think you can get that would make you even less involved in the European Union while still being in the European Union and having a very, very powerful role in framing its legislation? So park that for a minute, and you're perfectly welcome. You're perfectly welcome to ignore the fact that the European Union's negotiating position has been laid out in black and white for the best part of 2 years and hasn't changed 1 inch. You're perfectly entitled to pretend that's not true. Tell me why you're so keen to jump off this cliff without knowing where you're going to land.
Because this is the whole reason I voted Brexit in the first place. I mean, there's obviously this whole argument, or some people voted because they thought 350 million for the NHS, or...
no, you're much cleverer than that, clearly. You never believed any of that stuff. What was your reason?
No, it was none of that. For me, I saw the EU as a... And I still see, even 2 years later, I've not changed my opinion on why I voted, because you look at Italy. You've got Italy, Spain, Greece, Hungary, Poland. You've got so many cracks across the EU.
No, George, again, mate. Can you tell me why they've all got higher approval ratings for staying in the European Union than they had when we voted to leave?
I don't believe that. I mean, Italy's just voted in a very anti-EU party over there.
Both sides of it. The Lega. No, George, mate, you need to perhaps extend your reading a little further. Both sides of that coalition, the Lega and the Five Star Movement, yesterday announced they have absolutely no intention of leaving the Eurozone, let alone the European Union. So I'd ask you again, because I know a lot of people...
Not as yet.
A lot of people sell this line. No, not ever. A lot of people sell this line. Look at Italy, look at Portugal, look at Spain. It's become the new, they need us more than we need them, or it's become the new, get back control of our borders. But you know what happens when you pull those threads. They fall apart like a cheap suit. So you need to tell me why support for the European Union in all of the southern European countries that you've just mentioned has gone up exponentially since we voted to leave, and they've had a look at what leaving looks like. Why do you think that is, George?
Probably because they see the bullying tactics that he's been using against...
But the European Union's negotiating position has been laid out in black and white and hasn't shifted at all for 23 months. How is that bullying?
No, I'm just saying that the way Barnier and the way Tusk and Juncker have been acting towards our negotiators.
They've been representing the interests of member states, which we could still be if you want. But again, I mean, it's another word that I understand why you use it, and I could spend 10 minutes listing all the people who've poured this nonsense into your ear. But they laid out their negotiating position pretty much immediately after the result. It's been readable and published for all of that period of time. You can't say that they're bullying. Bullying would involve shifting and moving and changing. They know what they need. You cannot have membership of the single market without the acceptance of the 4 freedoms. So we're back to these 2 questions. Your main reason for voting to leave the EU, according to you, because you were too clever to fall for the lies about the NHS and all of that nonsense. I know. Yeah. So your main reason is, look what's happened in Greece and Italy, Spain and Portugal. And my question then becomes, why do you think all of those countries still have very high support for European Union membership, and it's gone up since we voted to leave? You need to give me a proper answer, George, before we crack on.
I'm trying.
Go on, then. Well, try harder, my friend.
Right. Let's look at a country like another sort of United States, as it were. Like you've got European Union with all these member states and everything like that. Let's look at the United States as an example. Right, in the States, you've got 52 states, all of a very similar wage.
George, I'm 3 minutes late for the news. I don't really understand why you're describing America to me.
What I'm trying to say, the European Union doesn't work. So you've got too many...
Okay, then why does everybody else want to stay in it?
Everybody else doesn't want to stay in it.
All right, George, and that's where we part, because now you're fantasising, and I'm sharing facts with you. And that's great. Let's shake hands, move on, and I hope your unicorn arrives soon. It's 10:33.
But you're ringing in your droves about North Korea, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Richard in Manchester, hello.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Well, finally, I hope the world can recognise that America has probably one of the brightest and most successful presidents that they have ever had. He's achieved something that nobody else has been able to do, and it fills me with a certain degree of confidence that having hopefully achieved what we believe he has achieved with the North Korean leader, that the next step will be to deal with the Iranian threat of a nuclear war.
Well, before we
I think we really ought to recognise
all right.
that.
Before we get on to Iran, if you want to go down that road, let's just focus on what you just said about this meeting. You see, you say he achieved what no one else has been able to achieve, which I would use different verbs in that sentence. He has done what no other president chose to do. Two different things.
Well, I don't agree with you. I think it's an achievement rather than an actual doing. He's actually achieved a meeting. He's achieved two diametrically...
But he's not the first person to be offered a meeting. He's the first president to have accepted, but not the first president to have been offered. So it's not an achievement, is it, to be offered a meeting?
You're being critical of the word achievement.
No, I'm not. I'm honestly not. I'm just trying to get across the fact. Listen, if he's successful and he denuclearizes that peninsula and brings those poor souls who have to live in North Korea into a more modern, freer world, I'll be the first to congratulate him and say he's done well. What I'm saying is...
Why do we congratulate him now?
Because there's nothing to congratulate him on yet. There's nothing to congratulate him on yet.
Let's not be so anti-Trump, so anti...
I'm genuinely not. I'm actually more anti-North Korea than Trump in this instance. I mean, I don't know whether you were listening when I read out that quote from 2005 when there was a six-party series of talks around North Korea. And, it achieved more than this. That's all I'm saying. That's the...
You're good, Sheila. You've used the word achieve. Good, so we are agreeing on that. He has achieved something.
No, I'm saying getting there and going there isn't an achievement. That was always on offer. Other presidents chose not to do it. That's the point I'm making about it. Getting there and doing that isn't an achievement. It's a choice.
Well, okay. Well,
that's all. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, I accept what you say, but I'll beg to differ. I would choose the word achievement.
Okay.
I do believe he's achieved something that's very special. I do believe that it augurs well for the future. I think it's about time people stop being so anti-Trump. He's not an angel. He's not perfect. But he is a very special individual who is able to see and to do things like nobody else has done. And totally unorthodox, totally different, but I think he will go down in history as a great president of the USA, warts and all, and I think it's about time that we in the UK recognise that. And I equally think that the visit that he is coming to make to the UK should be elevated really to a royal visit, because frankly I think the whole situation...
A full state visit, you mean?
A full state meets the Queen, exactly, rather than not meet the Queen. Let's recognise achievement, my word, not yours, where achievement, and let us hope that this will go on to bigger and better things, and it will augur well.
Can we talk about another couple of words? Concentration camps, North Korea.
Well, I won't accept that word, concentration camp. That is very wrong to use that word.
Why?
That word should only... That is extremely wrong to use that word.
Why?
It should only... Well, I'm going to explain to you. It should only ever be used in the context of Nazi Germany. It should never be used in the context of anywhere else. So I object very strongly to that use of word.
It's been used... Well, you may object, Richard, but it's been used internationally for a number of different settings. The Holocaust is specific to the events in World War II. Listen, a concentration camp, if concentrated numbers of people are kept in a camp, tortured, abused, starved... I'm really not. No, I'm really not. You just don't want words to mean what they mean. Richard, thank you. Richard in Manchester. Michael in Taunton. Hello.
Hi, Sheila. Up until the last caller's opinion on concentration camp, I was absolutely with him. If this was Mr. Obama doing this, you guys wouldn't be going for him like you're going for Trump. You guys show your personal hatred against the man, despite what you say.
But can you ask me? Sorry, can you tell me in what way I'm going for Mr. Trump here? What I'm asking is whether any nation whether it's our nation, Donald Trump, any reasonable, just nation should be sitting as an equal next to the likes of the leader of North Korea? That's what I'm asking.
Why, by just sitting next to him, is he classed as an equal? He's not.
It was a very great honour. It was a very great honour to meet him.
I would turn it around personally and say it's a great honour for the North Korean president to sit next to Mr. Trump. I would turn it around that way. And it's a sad shame that on such an, and I'll use the word achievement as well, because I agree with that's the right word, on such an achievement for this to happen, such the negative being focused on by the media. You guys just show your personal hatred by your words.
Michael, a concentration camp isn't a negative. It's a...
No, I'm not disputing the concentration camp bit. No, I just.
But what is that then? How would you characterise that? Because it isn't a negative. It's an abomination.
It is an abomination. You're absolutely right. But it's one step at a time, is it not? Listen, if Mr. Trump's going there to try and placate the nuclear threat, is he going to start hammering away at the concentration camp thing at the same time? That's ridiculous for him to do that. That's atrocious diplomacy is going to do that. There's a list, isn't there, of priorities when these guys meet. At the top and solely, at this stage, was the nuclear threat that terrifies the world. Let's come to the concentration camp issues. Once they've got rid of their bombs, let's hit them on that.
Well, okay, so we leave the people in the concentration camps in North Korea where they are and focus on nuclear. Is that the idea?
Well, that no doubt that's on the United States agenda as well, because that is horrific what's going on there. I absolutely agree. But how does that ever work, where you come to me on the nuclear issue and then you start bashing on the human rights thing? That is an issue.
My opening gambit was about the human rights issue. I didn't change tack. My opening question is about the human rights issue.
It shouldn't have been. I don't agree with that at all. And you wouldn't do that if Mr. Obama had achieved this. You would be singing his praises. He was your media darling. He couldn't do no wrong. Well, you wouldn't be focusing on the negative.
Not true, but anyway. But Michael, my question, it was at the very beginning, at the very, very beginning, I said all of us would be happy with a denuclearized North Korea, a denuclearized peninsula. All of us would be, wouldn't we? I also said I would be. I've also said since starting this conversation that I would be the first person to congratulate Donald Trump if today really genuinely marked the beginning of something that led to that and led to a changed North Korea. I've said all of those things. So the idea that I am just Trump bashing is nonsense. I am North Korea bashing.
Well, I think that's a guise, a disguise. And I think if you did meet him face to face to have to congratulate him and perhaps say sorry for some of the things he said, you'd say it through gritted teeth, to be honest. As the rest of you media guys, you can't stand him. You can't stand him because he challenges you.
I don't mind being challenged, evidenced by this conversation.
He insults you, and you don't like to be insulted, loads of you guys, because you're immature.
He's never insulted me. As a journalist.
He insulted you with his ideas and his speech at times.
His ideas about women definitely insult me, yeah. Michael, thank you for your call. David in Leighton. Hello.
Short issue. Hello. Short issue lesson. It was the British who invented the concentration camp in the Boer War, but I digress. Now, I agree with the other two callers. It does seem that the media, well, James and yourself, do seem a bit... lacking of class, may I say, about this meeting. Jeremy Corbyn, when he met the IRA, I heard you defend only 3 weeks ago, saying that sometimes you have got to sit down with nasty people. There was a debate going on when someone...
Yeah, I said it today. I said it today as well. International diplomacy always involves an element of holding your nose and getting on with it. However, all right. Think of Chamberlain and his piece of paper. I have in my hand a piece of paper, and the great hope that was invested in that. Absolutely empty. Led to nothing.
No, actually, it gave us time to rearm. And there is an argument that was Chamberlain's plan. Whether that was the truth or not, only Chamberlain would know. But
selfies with Kim Jong-un. How do you feel about that?
We're living in a different age. Who would have known perhaps Adolf and Neville might have sat down and done a selfie in them days?
And how would that look, Red? How would that look? What would a modern politician learn from that? Because I know what I'd learn from it.
70 years down the line, who knows? But we'd like...
You do know. You do know.
Defined
but you do know.
Career, unless the last 2 years you griped on about everything from Trump's hairdo to something else, and we might not be a bit more invigorated about the conditions of the North Korean people. But you ain't told us. We've had John Sweeney come on today with 2020 eyes.
What haven't I told you? What haven't I told you?
You certainly have told us. I've heard no feature in the last 2 years about the conditions in North Korea on LBC.
Well, you haven't been listening to my programme often enough.
Well, can you look in the history and fill us in when you've done a feature on the...
Well, did you not know? Did you not know that North Koreans are routinely arrested and held in camps and forced labour, brutalised,
yes,
sometimes? You did know that.
There was a time they was digging up their own dead and eating them because the starvation was so bad.
So you did know. So you didn't. You need me to tell you, even though I've talked about it. Well, what is it I'm not telling you?
That you're selective in your critiques. The friends of Jeremy. You're selective.
What's it got to do with Jeremy?
Well, as I just said, that you wouldn't critique Jeremy Corbyn. You defended him for talking about terrorists who kill people.
No.
When it's...
I'm no supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, just in case that's some impression that's landed on you over the last couple of years.
Perhaps a certain credo.
No. Politicians and leaders have to talk to all kinds of people. I get that, but not endlessly, and you don't have to give people equal status when they don't deserve equal status. And Kim Jong-un does not deserve equal status.
The man is a demagogue. We know this. Trump has got around to him. Slowly, catchy monkey.
Well, I listen to my words, David. I really, really hope you are right about that. But I give you the words of John Everard, former British ambassador to North Korea. Today is a great day for Kim Jong-un, and that sticks in my craw.
The two people sitting side by side, the man in the pink tie and the man in the white beard, if you can be in a white beard. But you said first. Yes, you start.
Having been around the first referendum and voting on it, it's like an echo chamber. I'm listening to everything that took place then. Then we were told at the common market, oh yes, our trade will be superb, we're going to get on with it, we can sell our products, and we've got Europe to go at. Now, after being asset stripped, this country, which was the biggest manufacturing industry in the world, railways, shipping, airplanes, you name it, we built it. Electric engines that were on the Panama Canal in the 1800s and were still there 100 years later. And they couldn't put one back that they buy in Japan.
OK.
English Electric and the likes of that were lost.
And you, sir, next. Woman there on the left, there in blue. Yes, you.
Thank you. I am really fed up of all the arguing. Nothing is getting really sorted out. We are a democracy. The House of Lords is not elected. Our MPs are, and they are there and always have been to carry out the will of the people. For me, all this bickering has been said is going on too long, and I cannot see why they just don't get their act together, get rid of the negativity that I have picked up here. They should really not talk about failure of these talks that they're having. It's about having a positive outlook going into it. Churchill would not have put up with all this, and I am beginning to think, and no matter people may laugh, but Donald Trump was able to go and get an agreement without the will of his Parliament, so to speak. And I'm beginning to think that possibly someone like that is needed here to take charge and sort it out.
Philip is in Sandbach in Cheshire. Philip, is that what happened yesterday?
Hello. Actually, I think you're distorting the whole issue of Brexit. We, the electorate, were asked by MPs for a very clear insight.
I have been over this quite a few times. Can we confine ourselves to what happened in the House of Commons yesterday?
Yes, I think basically those Conservative MPs who are rebelling are traitors. They are betraying.
But they're just asking for the right to vote on something in the event that it's appalling.
No, not at all.
No, what is it then?
They received a very clear mandate.
No, I appreciate that, but we're talking about what happened yesterday, very, very specifically. Here's what I think, Philip, and then you can pick it apart, okay? But let's deal in the specifics. They have posited the notion, and we will keep it theoretical for the purposes of our conversation. They've posited the notion that the Prime Minister is not going to be able to conjure up anything that isn't demonstrably and considerably inferior to our current arrangements. If that becomes clear, they want the right to say, whoa, stop it. And the government or the parliamentary majority and people like you don't want them to have the right to put the brakes on if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a brick wall. Now, what's wrong with that analysis, do you think?
Yes, because the alternative they're suggesting would keep us in the EU by the back door.
No, but that's not what happened I'm talking very specifically about what happened in the House of Commons yesterday. They say we must have the right to apply the brake if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a burning building. And you say, no, even if we're driving into a burning building, we must not have a brake.
Yes, I agree, because...
Yeah, I thought you might, actually. Yes.
If the Prime Minister can't...
You did hear the words that came out of my mouth. I said, if we're driving into a burning building, Philip in Sandbach doesn't want us to not only apply the brake, he doesn't want us to even have a brake.
If Brexit means falling off a cliff edge, so be it.
I salute your honesty, Philip. I salute your honesty.
That's what we voted for.
Absolutely. We voted to fall off a cliff edge and to drive into a burning building.
We did indeed.
No, you're right, we did. Is there any way we can prove that you rang in of your own volition, that you're not an actor, that you haven't been put up to this? Because I'm now going to get bombarded with emails saying... oh, carefully handpicked and filtered from all the cowards who haven't got the guts to ring in themselves. Can we prove that you're real?
Yes.
How?
I'm actually a Brexiteer.
Well, I know that, Philip, because I speak to people like you every day, but other people aren't quite as honest as you are, and they still think that there's an intelligent analysis of the stuff you've just said.
I've stood for UKIP 4 times
there you
as
go.
a candidate.
You see?
I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Bingo. The real deal. What did you vote for? We voted for pain and oblivion. And just talk me through the positives, the things that, when I put on the scales, that we're going to be poorer, that we're not going to be able to trade with the largest single market in the world, that we're going to be damaged. Well, the outgoing head of the CBI says that large parts of the car industry today are going to go extinct if we don't stay in the customs union. So I put all that on the scales on this side, all the measurable materials.
You haven't mentioned immigration.
Exactly that. So you put on the other side the stuff that really makes it all worthwhile. Go.
Immigration is the greatest threat that's faced us.
Yes.
Since the Second World War.
It is.
Mass immigration.
Absolutely.
Mass immigration leads to third world ghettos.
It does. Yes.
And that's creating the enemy within.
Right, you are.
That's why.
Yes.
That's why we voted to leave.
It is. Yes.
It was a clear
ghettos and the enemy within. Yes.
And
so you're talking about ghettos of continental European people, like sort of Little Venice.
The open door to Europe is also an open door to the rest of the world.
But it isn't, though, is it?
What do you mean it isn't? We've had 20,000 Somalis come to Britain via the Netherlands.
Right. And how many of them are in Sandbach?
Oh, Sandbach is 98% white British.
Well, I suppose...
So my neighbourhood, fortunately, hasn't yet been affected.
No.
But around the southeast,
yes,
what you have essentially are cesspits. Third world cultures.
Do you know where? Because I'd quite like to go. I live in the southeast. Do you know where they are?
London is the worst example, obviously.
I'm actually in the middle of London at the moment, and you're in Sandbach, and you're telling me that what I can see out of my own window is what is it, an illusion?
In most London boroughs...
Well, go on, talk me through which ones.
In most London boroughs...
Well, go on, talk me through which ones have you been to?
Like Lambeth, etc.
Lambeth?
Etc.
Where the Archbishop of Canterbury lives?
Whites are actually in a minority.
In a minority?
So in a minority. that's a great threat to social stability and
it is. But you know that the European Union contains no countries that are not majority white.
That's not the point. That's not the point.
What is the point?
The point is where you've got these large immigrant ghettos who are living
like in Lambeth,
within their own cultures,
of French people and Italians and Spanish moral framework.
We end up with social with chaos,
right?
And a lack of social cohesion.
We do a lack of social cohesion. What does cohesion mean, Philip?
It means neighbourhoods coming together and communities coming together.
As long as they're not brown.
Subscribing. I happen to be an East African Asian myself.
Of course you do, Philip. Of course you do. And do you live in a ghetto?
No, I've chosen to live in a town that's 98% white British.
Right, you are. And are you the enemy within?
I'm an assimilationist.
Can you prove that you're not the enemy within, Philip?
A few of us, James.
Prove it, Philip.
To assimilate.
A few of us have chosen to assimilate. And there you have it. Just for the record, you are 100% real, Philip. And you've rang up entirely of your own volition, and you're not an actor or a stooge or anything like that. You're a full-time UKIP candidate. Am I right or am I right?
I stood 4 times for UKIP. I'm no longer a member. I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Okay, mate.
I stood 4 times for UKIP.
Have a great day. It's 21 minutes after 10.
Hello, I'm Philip Pinto, UKIP's candidate in Milton Keynes South. We are no longer a single-issue party and have a raft of policies from restoring Britishness to transport and welfare. During my campaign, I shall focus on immigration and the housing expansion in our city. For if mass immigration were controlled, there would be no housing shortage. UKIP is the only non-racist, patriotic, anti-immigration party. Thank you for watching, and please consider voting for me.
Morality in an increasingly secular society, as we see increasingly the ramifications of commoditising and encouraging vileness. You know, the Mail today uses half French as a way in which to attack Dominic Grieve. It's quite unbelievable how unpleasant things have begun. Jacob Rees-Mogg talks of food banks being uplifting in almost direct contradiction of what the Holy Father, the Pope, teaches, that alleged Catholic. Ian Duncan-Smith goes to church and presides over the shambles that is universal credit, a shambles that, as we heard earlier in the programme, has led in part to people taking their own lives. 12:19 is the time. So clearly religion is full of hypocrites, but it does a lot of good. It teaches people to try to be better. As religion declines, where do we get those lessons from instead? Toby's in Reading. Toby, it's quite a big one, this, to end the week together, but you can kick us off.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, it's a big one. Yes, interesting what you say, hypocrites. If we're really honest, we're all hypocrites.
Of course we are.
One of the first things you see when you join a church or a fellowship, I would say, is, oh my goodness, there are so many hypocrites here.
Yes.
You spend a little longer there and you realize they are people wanting to be good, trying to be good, and you are one of them. And you start realizing a few things about yourself. What I wanted to say, though, James, is we can try and be nice, we can be as nice as possible, but it won't help just with do's and don'ts. You have to have that relationship there. So rule book is okay, but unless you have a proper relationship with, and in this case, God, you're not really going to change deeply. It will just be on the outside.
Well, you've almost contradicted yourself there with the greatest of love and respect, because
Thank you.
You can be a profoundly good person and not believe in God.
You can do many good things.
No. You can be a profound... See, now... No, dear, we're there already. You can be a profoundly good person and not believe in God.
Okay. So, I mean, you come from a Roman Catholic approach. I guess, in terms of
Not
your
really.
history.
I come from a James O'Brien approach, which involves a lot of Catholicism in my youth. But you seem to be resisting the statement that you can be a profoundly good person without believing in God, which kind of makes you the definition of what I describe as bad religion. Because no one can be good unless they believe what you believe.
But one of the things that really...
You're not contradicting me.
No. One of the things that
there we are.
Western society was the Christian gospel, the good news, and that is about...
Only after Christianity arrived here from the Middle East.
You being able to change deeply and actually becoming, instead of trying to be good, or sometimes even putting on a facade of doing good things whilst inside you are still struggling and battling.
No, you might be. You might be, but that's the whole point of this hour, is you don't get the right to tell anybody else what they are and what they're not. And I'm grateful to you for the call, but I'm afraid you are absolutely the definition of bad religion. Unless you do what I do, unless you believe what I believe, unless you agree with me, you can't be good. Good luck.
Karen has called from Bracknell, and Rowan in Bushy and Watford to talk about immigration and the standards we set about how we approach the people at the heart of the story. Karen, hello.
Hello, Sheila. Good afternoon. I hope you're well.
I'm very well, thanks.
Yes, I was just calling to say that countries have a right to protect their borders.
They do.
And we have a right also to help people, which I think we do plenty of that. And I think that what's missing here is the effect that migration has on the people that have a right to be there, those citizens. And this is not what's being covered, you know. I think America has a right to protect its borders, and I think England has a right to protect its borders.
Of course, nobody's disputing that. The question I'm asking is what standards of treatment of the people attempting to come in will you accept, and what standards won't you accept?
They should be deported. They should be deported.
Every single one of them?
Away. Well, if they have no right to be here.
Well, sometimes the right needs testing, doesn't it, before you deport people?
Yeah, but I think we're in a situation now in this country where we've got these human rights barristers, you know, that jump on everybody, you know, that these people come into contact with. And, you know, it should, once it's established, you know, that these people have no right to be here, they should be sent from whence they came.
But we've seen, Karen, that sometimes people are established as having no right to be here, when in fact they very much do have a right to be here. Do you see what I'm saying? That we have to test things. Of course, we test things, and we test things
Well, I heard the last
respectfully.
caller when she said her mother was in prison for drug trafficking, and you never challenged her on that.
That's because I knew it. I didn't need to challenge her on it because for a couple of reasons. It wasn't her crime. She wasn't complaining that her mother was deported for the crime.
She was deported with her mother.
No, she. By the end of the conversation, it looks as though the mother had rights to be here.
Well,
it was a Windrush generation.
Well, if that's the case, then you know I'm clearly living in the wrong country because you know I don't want drug traffickers living in this country.
Well, do we deport them all, or just the ones who are brown?
No. But it doesn't matter whether they're brown, white, yellow, or green.
No, but if they're British, we can't deport them, can we?
Drug traffickers and they're from another country, then they should be deported back.
Oh yeah, you get no argument from me about that. But it's interesting how quickly conversations about migration become about criminality, and most migration isn't about criminality.
No, I'm saying that any migrant, you know, any migrant that comes into this country, whether they're criminals or not, if they have no right to be here, if it's been established that they have no right to be here, they should be sent back because it's having a detrimental effect on those people that do have a right to live in this country. You know, well, it's clear to anyone with eyes that, you know, our way of life has been detrimentally affected. It's difficult now to get your child into a school. It's difficult now to get an appointment with your GP. You know, and when you question your GP as to why it's so difficult to get an appointment, they say because of the volume of people that are here. You know, and that's and it's having an effect on our lives, and that's why we have a right to protect our borders.
We do, and you'll get no argument from me about protecting our borders and protecting the well-being of the people who already live in this country. Of course you won't. I'm just trying to get a sense of sort of reasonableness around how we deal with the people who do want to come and live here from elsewhere. We have to, don't we have to have a standard? You know, we talk about British values. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what they are. Would you, for example, be relaxed about toddlers being kept in cages in Calais or, God forbid, over here? I mean, I wouldn't be happy about that. There's very little I would drop everything for and go and protest about. But that's something I would. Would you?
Now, as you may have seen, cries of shame echoed across the House of Commons today when Sir Christopher Chope derailed attempts to make upskirting a criminal offence. It was thought that the bill, which would outlaw the practice of taking photographs up a person's skirt without their knowledge or permission, would go through unchallenged. Many thought his decision incomprehensible, unfathomable, until they went back to look at his previous voting record on a whole range of issues and private members' bills. We play you out with what has been quietly nicknamed the audacity of Chope. Good night.
Voyeurism Offences Bill, second reading.
No. Objection taken. Second reading. Second reading what then?